Welcome. And today's Alex Salmond show, we turn our attention to show business, both east and west. First to Lollywood, the thriving Pakistani film and television industry. We'll be focusing there first. And then to Hollywood, where I'll be interviewing Mr. Brian Cox, a convinced supporter of Scottish independence who recently played Winston Churchill, the greatest Briton of all time. It should be fascinating. But first, over to Taz for your tweets, your messages and your emails.
Thank you, Alex. We continue to receive a number of very interesting messages, emails and Facebook messages from you. One from James E. Grant, who says, "Just saw Alex Salmond dressed in a kilt outside Edinburgh Castle." I have to say, James, I checked the date of your tweet because I was concerned you were still walking around in that kilt. Thankfully, we've got him in a suit this week. Hugh Kirk, who Facebook messaged us, says, "It takes a brave man to imitate the late, great Ricky Fulton. Well done, Alex." Les of At Scotland Screams also says, "Ayek, great memories of a great man, and Ricky Fulton wasn't bad either." Those of you who saw our Christmas Hogmanay shows will have seen that Alex did a tribute to the late, great Ricky Fulton in his piece, The Reverend Former First Minister, Reverend Jolly. That's gone down particularly well. In fact, it's had over 150,000 views on Facebook, which is probably why Tom Heaney says in the Facebook messages, "Like a fine wine, his comedy skills mature with age." So I think Alex should keep practising. Last week's show was about the Council of Europe. And Elizabeth at Raise the Game tweets, "Excellent, insightful show. Emphasis on Council of Europe, really interesting." This is followed up by Morag, who says, "I agree. Was unaware that the Council of Europe was completely different to the EU." Both Alex and I and the whole team here at the Alex Salmond Show are really pleased that we're able to bring you interesting stories and details of all of the different institutions that exist across the world. And if there's anything else in particular you'd like us to highlight, please don't hesitate to contact us by either email, Facebook or Twitter. Over 26,000 Lollywood feature films have been produced in Pakistan since 1948. One of the highest grossing films made $4.9 million worldwide at the box office. Dramas play a huge part of Pakistan's television industry, and as Bollywood is renowned in India for its films, Pakistan is very well known for its excellent television dramas. Aijaz, Aslam and Faysal Qureshi are regarded as two of the best and most respected actors in Pakistani TV and cinema. Aijaz is best known for playing the lead in many hit drama serials, and as well as acting, Faysal is the host of one of Pakistan's most popular morning shows. We're delighted to be joined today by two fantastic stars of screen, both the small screen and the big screen, from Pakistan, the heartthrobs of millions, Aijaz, Aslam and Faysal Qureshi. Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show.
Thank you very much.
Of course, the film industry, Faysal, in which you're involved in, you're a huge star, admired by millions, if not billions, around the world, has gone from strength to strength because many years ago it didn't have the investment that it needed, but now very much you're on a par in batting, you know, against Bollywood. It's Bollywood versus Lollywood, which is fantastic to see. How do you find that?
It's very difficult to compare with Bollywood because they have a big market. Yeah. They have a lot of cinemas in their country. It's a way bigger country than Pakistan.
The film industry of Pakistan is booming, and it's booming very quickly, which is a very good thing.
And of course you've got a big audience in the UK. I mean, I myself, of course, was on a Lollywood series back in 2000, and I mean, The Castle, and
we got inspired by you.
I played a ghost, and the Urdu was dubbed, admittedly, but you know, nonetheless, I think people knew what I was saying. I take it you guys are familiar with my work, and was it an inspiration to you?
Yes, of course, we got inspired.
I made a drama
series.
You
also worked in a
in Scotland. His name was Ghost. And we shot in Scotland.
Scotland, yeah.
West Kilbride.
Right, and we're getting good talent from UK as well. Recently, there have been like two new girls. One is Tasmina and Kubra Khan. They're very famous in Pakistan. They struggled initially because they had an accent. Obviously, when they speak in our language, Urdu, they have an accent, like British accent. So they struggled. They worked hard on their accent, and now they are the most popular stars in Pakistan. They're doing movies, they're doing TV series, TV dramas, everything.
So obviously in amongst the work you do for telly, you've got a lot of things that are dear to your heart because you're in the living rooms of millions of people every single day of the week. Therefore, you have a huge constituency to speak to. And we spoke briefly, Faysal, about your interest in dealing with Alzheimer's and raising awareness about it. How big a problem is it in Pakistan, and do people know about it?
They don't realize, they don't know, because, you know, when I present the script to the channel that I really want to work on this, so he was like, what is this? I said, this is a disease. A lot of women going through with this disease. So it's a disease or it's a short-term memory thing. I said, no, you know, we can control it. We just have to tell people how to, educate people how to cater this thing.
Alex recently interviewed in Geneva Sir Jackie Stewart. Who,
a very moving interview, and Jackie's his wife Helen, Lady Helen, suffers from dementia, and Jackie's launched the Race Against Dementia. You know, obviously referring to his great career as a racing driver, and he's carrying it forward with his usual gusto to both to raise awareness and to raise funds and to raise research into the conditions. So I think that the more awareness, the better. Yeah. I'm a politician who occasionally has dabbled in show business, but there have been show business people who've more than dabbled in politics. One thinks of Ronald Reagan or Arnie Schwarzenegger, or even here, Glenda Jackson, of course, was an Oscar-winning actress who became a member of Parliament. Even my old pal Sean Connery, you know, has an interest in politics. He's never run for election. Now, I want to ask you guys, are you thinking of any entry into the political dimension?
I think our politicians in Pakistan, our politicians are the better actor than us. All the time, you know, the drama is going on news channels all the time. So you just put on the TV at breaking news. You know what happened? So they are fighting all the time. So they are better actors.
That's a shame, because I think politics is what it is, and there are rivalries and difficulties that exist across the world. But I think when creative people become embroiled in it, are unable to do what they do best, which is play to international audiences, that's really sad. And I suppose I want to take you on to a question about how much you feel you play a role of ambassadors for Pakistan around the world. I mean, you obviously get recognised everywhere.
So there's a big responsibility on us. So,
but if people actually get up and say something they care about, whether it be Kashmir, or whether it be a campaign on Alzheimer's, or whether it be something political, I mean, to me, this is fantastic. I mean, this is what the audience at the Oscars or other awards are waiting to hear. I mean, it's much, much better.
When people are watching you, you know, and like bigger stars, a lot of people are following you, so they want to, you know, hear what this person, this actor says. The people who are following, so, you know, we have a great responsibility on us.
Now, gentlemen, you've had many awards in your careers, but you've never had a quaich, a Scottish loving cup. So I'm going to ask Tasmina, under the circumstances, to present you with the Alex Salmond quaich. The idea is you put whiskey or a soft drink, whatever you want, in the quaich, and you pass it around your friends.
We'll have water in it.
Only your close friends.
Thank you, it's beautiful, and I believe it's handmade.
Definitely, I made it myself.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And the quaich means cup of kindness. Now from east to west, from Lollywood to Hollywood, because I'm now joined by the star of stage and screen, Mr. Brian Cox. Brian, welcome to the Alex Salmond Show.
Nice to see you, Hans.
And look, we're in the week of the Golden Globes, and I know you were nominated for a Golden Globe. You won an Emmy,
100 years ago.
Well, not quite. But the question I really want to ask is, when you appear at these big award ceremonies, do you actually know you've won?
No, you don't know.
You're serious?
Yeah, you don't know you won.
And at this week's Golden Globe Awards, obviously the Time's Up campaign, the stars of Hollywood making their protest by all wearing black. I mean, what do you feel about protests like that? Do you think they have their place, or do you think it's out of place?
It's very strange because, you know, it's been a long time coming, but actually historically it's been around for a much longer than one thinks. I mean, this is not new.
So Time's Up is really a good slogan.
Yeah, the Time's Up it's been going on, and the time has been up for a long, long time, and finally, I think, you know, and as the ceremony showed the other night, they've finally had enough, and it's time to protest.
Now, the other political thing that happened, according to the social media, is Oprah Winfrey made what's been described as a presidential nomination speech. So what about Oprah for president? Would she be gathering your backing?
Well, she's a pretty bright woman. She's done amazing things. She's very, very popular. I don't know quite honestly, I don't know if she'd want to be president. You know, I think it's a tough job.
But how about yourself? I mean, have you had any electoral ambitions, either in Scotland or indeed now as an American citizen in America?
No, somebody once asked me if I would stand as MP in Dundee, and I had to decline because I had too much work on. So I know.
The MP's no difficult. You could have fitted it in.
I know, no, you can't fit it in because you would have to be in the lobby, you have to vote, you have to do all that.
Arnie was governor of California. Did that not give you the...
No. That's not for me. I'll just follow my mercenary calling and draw my wages.
Of the politicians you've played, I mean, have you, because you played a range of politics. I mean, most recently Churchill, an extraordinary performance in the film last year, the Churchill film. But you played a range. You played Michael Martin, the Speaker of the House of Commons.
Yes,
so have you got a favourite?
My favourite character I played was Nye Bevan.
All right.
I did a film about Nye Bevan, which was written by a wonderful writer called Trevor Griffiths, and this was in the 90s, and it was about his last days, and it was a fantastic film, and he was an extraordinary character because he was the guy who created the National Health Service.
And was he your political inspiration? Because you were very much a Labour Party supporter.
Yeah,
I mean, you voiced over the, if I remember correctly, the 1997
I did the
landslide election broadcast. It was all down to you.
Yeah, I did it, you know, fighting with Mr. Mandelson about being, you know, he wanted to be much more brutal towards John Major, and I was very resistant of that because I thought John Major was a rather good man. His sell-by date was well and truly up by 97, so it was a... there was going to be a change, but nobody expected such a landslide as it was.
But some 15 years or 17 years later, you're a prominent supporter of Scottish independence.
That's right.
But for you, this was very much an intellectual conversion, a political conversion. You wouldn't describe yourself as a Scottish nationalist.
No, I would never describe myself. I've never described myself as a nationalist, but I am certainly an independent. I mean, though I think the Nationalist Party has done, an amazing job, and they did become the keepers of the flame of social democracy, which was dying 5 or 6 years ago. You know, it was, and it still is, pretty absent down here.
Max Kaiser's financial survival guide, liquid assets, are those that you can convert into cash quite easily. But keep in mind, no asset's immune to inflation. Better watch Kaiser report.
I had a great education, a good job, and a family that loved me. I'd never had to worry about how I would eat and where I would sleep. But I'm facing Christmas alone, out on the streets of London.
No, you want to be arrested. I'm not going to get... I couldn't open up the door to let you in, you asshole.
Do you know, does St Martin in the Fields still give out food for the homeless still?
Well done. Thank you very much. That's really, really kind of you.
Because you don't really feel like a human being, you know? And then that guy just came over to me, saw me, and gave me all the change he had in his pocket.
At RT, we have a great team, but we needed to strengthen before the FIFA World Cup. And who better than a legend to keep it tight at the back?
In 1992, Denmark qualified for the European Championships at the very last moment. No one believed in us, but we won. And I'm hoping to bring some of that winning spirit to the RT team. Recently, I've had a lot of practice, so I can guarantee you that Peter Schmeichel will be on the best form since my last World Cup. I can from that. Throw it, please. That was an old joke. I was only kidding. Here I come, Russia. Right. No, left, more left. Okay, stop. That's really good, that.
Brian Cox, You did 2 terms as a rector, but a rector of an ancient Scottish university like Dundee is a huge position of influence, elected by the student body and sometimes the wider academic body, but actually chairs the governing body of the university.
What I loved about being rector was the fact that I could set up surgeries and I could talk to the students about the individual problems they had, and I have great criticism of university education because I'm a great believer in the conversation. You know, my time there and what I realised is that a lot of the way universities are planned in relations with their students need to be dealt with. And of course I had the problem, well, not the problem, but I inherited the difficulty that students had, the loneliness that they feel inside the university setup, their inability to deal with their own perhaps social diseases like anorexia or what have you that some of the young women and young men suffered from. So it was something that was very, very, you know, it was something that really, you know, because the idea of rector in its old sense was, you know, the chancellor took care of the academic side and the rector took care of the spiritual side. So, you know, being a humanist and, you know, almost atheist, I took that responsibility, which was the humanist aspect of how the students dealt with their time.
But your time as rector, just ending quite recently, your twice term, that coincided with a big change in your home city of Dundee, and a change for the better. Many things moving forward in the university and in the city itself.
And the rise of the UNA. Well, I mean, Dundee is a much blighted city. Its history is one of blighted, which is, you know, there's a kind of parallel element that I have with my city, that we're survivors. I mean, they call Dundee the city of discovery, but I think it's the city of survival, actually. And it's always come through because the people are great. I mean, it was the most corrupt city in Scotland in the 1960s. I mean, they literally, the Labour Party, a corrupt Labour Party, literally destroyed the city. You know, they made it, and it was like the biggest car park in Europe.
But now it's changing. You mentioned the Victoria and Albert arising from the River Tay, which is opening this year.
And we have aspect to the Tay, which was never there before. You know, you couldn't see the Tay. You know, but we have this great frontage now, and it's fantastic.
So do you think the V&A will be as influential in Dundee as, let's say, the Guggenheimers in Bilbao?
I have no question of that. I mean, I think it leads on to a lot of other things, and people are beginning, it's a magnet, because, and also, I mean, even though I criticise the elements of I think it's a great university, and I would recommend any kid to go to Dundee, because it's a great environment.
But you said Dundee's a city of survivors, but Winston Churchill didn't survive in Dundee.
No. But he was not tolerated because he was there from 1908. He was MP from 1908 to 1922, and he was greatly supported by the Irish. But when he got to 1922, with the Black and Tans, with the whole 6 counties deal in Northern Ireland and the death of Michael Collins, a lot of the Irish community held.
So he went from being a friend of Ireland to an enemy of Ireland and got ushered out of Dundee.
And it was mirrored by the electorate in Dundee.
And you had a family connection.
I had a family connection, yeah. My uncle Geordie, when I was a wee boy, used to tell me about Churchill, who he admitted that he really ultimately said, but he was the man for us when it came to the war. But he said, but before that, he said, I remember Will, he said, we were doing in the city square, he said, and Churchill came in and they brought him in and he was on a big wheel, he was on a big armchair with sort of looked like paddles, like oars. They were carrying him in because he was sick. And he was no wheel, and we shouted at him. I said, I shouted at the guys that were carrying him, I said, how much did he pay you? And the guy shouted back, £1. £1. And my uncle shouted back, we'll give you 2 if you drop him.
So when you were doing, because Churchill wasn't too pleased about me.
No, he was he really disliked.
He was beaten by a temperance candidate called Scrimgeour.
Yeah, that's right.
So if you get beaten by a temperance candidate in Dundee,
he was thugged as well.
That's right. So he sort of cursed the city, didn't he?
He did. He actually made a speech on the platform, the train. He actually got them to hold the train, and he went out the back and he made this speech to all these people who were sort of trying to get him out of the city, saying, and he was very brave, I have to say, to talk to Dundonians the way he did, but he did say, I will see the grass growing green over what will be an industrial wasteland.
It's a great film, and for those who haven't seen it, should definitely catch up with it, because it's a fantastic film. So you've played Nye Bevan, you've played Churchill. Any other big politicians that you've played?
Well, I played my Emmy. The Emmy I won for playing Hermann Göring. Which was, of course, somebody completely different. And Göring was really interesting because, again, you get into the skin of somebody who was Hitler's patron, and he was Hitler's frontman for so long. And even though at the end, in 1945, Hitler sentenced him to death because Göring was not part of the final solution, even though he had created the concentration camps. And by the way, he created those concentration camps based on the British example of what happened in the Boer War. And they were the inspiration for Göring. But he was a very complicated man. He was a bit of a show-off. He was a cross-dresser. So there was elements to him which were quite sensational. But he was brilliant. And also, he was extraordinary in the way he defended his position, because, you know, he wanted to be sentenced to death as a soldier.
This is at Nuremberg.
At Nuremberg.
And this film was set in Nuremberg trials.
It was set in the Nuremberg process, and it was really interesting because he wanted to be executed. He wanted to be shot, but they were going to hang him, so he actually took his own life. But what he did was he gave them a lecture. Robert Jackson, who was the American prosecutor, the Attorney General, had been, or did become the Attorney General, American Attorney General, he did give them a lecture on why National Socialism happened. And it was a very plausible lecture, too, about, the state that Germany was in, the punishment of Versailles, the fact that, because he himself, Göring did an amazing thing. He took his own squadron and flew them and abandoned them in Switzerland, walked back, and he went to Sweden. He lived in Sweden for a long time. And he came back when this funny wee character, this wee house painter from Vienna started up, and he became his promoter.
And you've already said you deprecate the politics of President Trump, you deprecate the Brexit process, but is there a sort of thing where you see and understand some of the forces which have led to these unsavoury election results?
Well, I do. It's the fact that you cannot ignore the populace. And the populace has been ignored on both sides of the Atlantic for far too long. And of course, what happens when you ignore the populace is that ignorance builds up.
And let's talk about your own personal campaigns. I mean, you've been very prominent in Diabetes UK, a condition you suffer from yourself. But this aspect of the profile that can be given to key campaigns by sort of major figures and stars. But you've embraced this as one of your projects.
Well, yeah, I mean, Diabetes UK, of course, touched me personally because I am diabetic and I have a terrible sweet tooth, which is developed in childhood. And of course, that's the danger point. It's all to do with children.
It wasn't Cooter's candy.
Well, it was everything. It was midget gems and
famous Scottish delicacies.
Yes, sports
explained to the international audience.
Exactly, sports mixers.
Not
gums.
necessarily to be recommended.
Not at all to be recommended. And but I was raised on all that, and of course that's how it starts. It starts with the children, and we still do not acknowledge, and the sugar industry is pretty.
You did a documentary.
I did a documentary about sugar.
About the addiction of sugar.
Yeah, and sugar is addictive. I mean, I interviewed a guy in this documentary who was addicted to iron brew. One of the big things is low fat, the whole low fat myth, which was created by, it was actually created by in America, the idea that the sugar industry didn't want to be touched, so they said it was all fats. Well, actually, fats are healthy for you.
And did you equate the sugar industry with the alcohol industry and the drugs industry?
I think sugar is much more pernicious. I really think it's infinitely more pernicious than either of those four things. Diabetes is costing a fortune in the National Health Service. If you could cure diabetes, the National Health Service bills would drop enormously. And that's real. That is a real problem.
So this is a real crusade that you're on.
Because I'm also an addict. I'm a sugar addict. And I have problems. I just got a letter from my doctor today saying your HA1C is up. You've got to get it down.
The fact does remain that Churchill drank like a fish right through his political career, ran the war, it must have been in an inebriated state in many kind of key decisions.
And he was also a depressive.
Also a depressive, but, you know, lived into his 90s and became the greatest Briton of all time.
Well, I mean, I think that, I mean, you know, the process of living is still such a mystery to us. Why some people die at the age of, I mean, a lot of people sort of die, get to their late 60s and then pop off around about 68, 67 is a big figure for people. I lost...
But no us, Brad.
No, we're over that now. But I lost a great friend of mine, you know, which was completely unexpected, which was Alan Rickman, you know, who died at the age of 6. And Alan was a great man in the theatre, just a great man, generally speaking, and died far too young, as far as I'm concerned. And he had pancreatic cancer, which, of course, pancreatic cancer is the pancreas not functioning in the way it should, and the cankers build up and what have you. And that's also linked with sugar. You know, that is because that's where you create insulin, you know. So there's the health aspect of prevention is very, very important, and it's a thing that one should look to, and I feel that we haven't done enough about it.
How about your hopes for politics? I mean, we're at the start of a year. Well, you know, if you were doing your New Year resolutions for change in politics, Scotland, world, internationally, well, what would you like to see?
There's this sort of conflict between the particular and the general. What is needed in that community as opposed to what's needed in the bigger wide world. And I think there's always this conflict that goes on. And it came to me really during the referendum.
This is Scottish referendum.
The Scottish referendum. And when I got behind it, which was almost intellectual, the reason I got behind it was because of social democracy. And because the Labour Party, I felt, had lost a lot of its values that I believed in and had gone. And so I embraced Scottish independence. But what I felt was that, and it's the thing that really irks me about still the UK, is it's still very feudal. It's still based on an old feudal notion of everybody in their place. You know, America, for all its problems, and there are many, probably many more than here in many ways, but its fundament is egalitarian.
Well, you're the only actor who played in both Braveheart and in Rob Roy simultaneously.
At the same time, the positive and the negative.
but in terms of your own personal, what projects are you working on now?
I'm doing a thing for HBO, which I'm in the middle of, based in New York, playing I'm playing the leader of the 5th largest media conglomerate in the world. And he's a man he's a self-made man called Logan Roy.
Does he have Scots ancestry?
He does have Scots ancestry. Mm-hmm. He came across as a child. He was a refugee to Canada, and he worked on his uncle's ranch. And then he went back to Scotland for a while, and then he came back, and then he set up his empire. And he has these 4 children who all hate him, and he's not very fond of them either. And it's really about a dysfunctional media family. It's very sharp. It's very dark, black, and quite
totally
funny.
Fictional, of course.
Totally fictional. Yes, totally pretentious. Yeah.
Brian Cox, now before you go, for the new year, you're entitled to the Alex Salmond Quaich.
Oh, thank you, Alex.
Now, under no circumstances put any sugar in there.
No sugar will
Alcohol
go in there.
only, and only malt whiskey.
Oh, well, that will be the case. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
What I thought was interesting about hearing from these film stars of East and West is that both see part of their public role as campaigning for causes. In the case of Faysal and Aijaz, dementia. In the case of Brian Cox, diabetes. Now, that sort of good work seldom generates criticism. It's commendable nonetheless. What does often provoke attack is when actors venture into the more directly political arena. And yet, why should this be so? If someone cares enough about the human condition to enter public debate, then their celebrity is being used to good advantage. They're prepared to put their heads above the political parapet. Acting is no disqualification from political knowledge. After all, a not hugely talented actor once became a successful president of the United States. Those who lead criticism in the press, these people who love to exercise power without taking any responsibility, they should be shrugged off. Meanwhile, those in rival parties who go on the attack are usually just pea-green with envy that their party had failed to land the big fish. So good luck to people like Brian Cox. They grace public life just as they grace the stage and silver screen. So from all here at the Alex Salmond Show, it's goodbye for now.